Ladies and gentlemen, the doors are now closing for the sessions. Please take your seats. حضرات السيدات والسادة، سوف تغلق الأبواب الآن للجلسات. الرجاء أخذ مقاعدكم. Ladies and gentlemen, the doors are now closing for the sessions. Please take your seats. حضرات السيدات والسادة، سوف تغلق الأبواب الآن للجلسات. الرجاء أخذ مقاعدكم.
Welcome back, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you back here again. Now, our very first panel discussion this afternoon is about protecting the benefits of tourism in a multilateral world. It's not your typical, usual topic at these global forums. So what then is the intersection between multilateralism and tourism? Well, let's find out. It's a pleasure to invite to the stage our panelists, beginning with Her Royal Highness Dana FIRAS, President of the Board of the PETRA National Trust and also UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador, RENÉ TRABELSI, Minister of Tourism and Handicrafts of Tunisia, ZURAB POLOLIKASHVILI, Secretary-General of the World Tourism Organization, MAJD Mohammed SHWEIKEH, who is the Minister of Tourism and Antiquities of Jordan, and last but not least, AKBAR Al-Bakr, Secretary-General of the Qatar National Tourism Council, as well as CEO of Qatar Airways. And again, to moderate this session, it's a pleasure to welcome as well CNN's ZAIN ASHER. The floor is yours.
everyone. I think we can all agree that tourism is a huge factor when it comes to economic growth and global development. Firstly, it's a massive source, especially for developing countries, for foreign exchange earnings. It also tends to employ a higher percentage of women and young people, again, hugely important. But I think one of the most important aspects in terms of the benefits of tourism is really that in a world where rather jobs are increasingly being lost to technology, it continues to be labor intensive. I think the big thing, though, is going forward, how do we make sure that tourism continues to be inclusive, and also sustainable? So I want to start with Secretary General. Thank you so much for being with us. We know that tourism is clearly a global development vehicle. When you think about tourism, tourism is increasingly mentioned as part of the UN SDG Sustainable Development Goals, particularly number 8, which is decent work and economic growth, number 12, responsible consumption and production, and also number 14, life below water. But you really think that tourism should be a part of all 17 UN SDG goals. Why?
Good morning, dear guests. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be and to present tourism first time, by the way, on Doha Forum, because this is first time when tourism took an important part of this forum, and I think this is the place to promote. And I don't want to talk about all 17 SDGs because it will take a long time.
Yes, of course.
But the most important thing for all of us, and I'm sure that all of us we will agree, that to create new jobs. We mentioned many times that the best recipient, the best opportunity to create new jobs, the fastest one is tourism. Tourism can create, and we are supporting and we are doing a lot of things to create new jobs all over the world. So always this is our main objective. Now, there are some sub-objectives which goes in parallel with to create the new jobs. First of all, it's education. Without competitive jobs, it's important to go parallel in the fast-growing sector, which is one of the fastest-growing sector in the world. And for that reason, we are focused a lot on education. This year, we announced like a year of education and tourism. Next year, we want to go further, and we are going to announce a rural tourism year. We want to support new destinations, new places, new tourism opportunities, again, to create new jobs and to expand our knowledge and our educational centers worldwide. So regarding your question, I think, of course, all the SDGs are linked with the sector. There are lots of opportunities, lots of things to do, and I'm sure that we all together we can do lots of interesting projects. One of them, and I'm very thankful to our dear chairman of Qatar Airways and Qatar was who supported from the beginning of my mandate. I started 1.5 years ago, and we created and we launched it with IEU University, first ever online academy for tourism. This is a revolutionary project, and I want to thank again to Qatar Airways because, and the chairman to support this project. This project gives opportunities everyone to study and to learn and to know basic knowledge and to have basic knowledge about tourism. I think that next year we will focus and we will support to expand these courses all around the world.
Okay. I do want to talk also, I think, equally importantly, about some of the things that draws tourism to various countries. We are going to talk about Petra in Jordan. Obviously, you're extremely passionate about that, Your Royal Highness. But where we are right now is obviously Qatar. Qatar is going to be hosting the World Cup in 2022. I want to ask Your Excellency Al-Bakr, how are you positioning Qatar? The World Cup is no doubt going to be a watershed moment when it comes to tourism in this country. How are you positioning this country to take full advantage of that moment?
First and foremost, I'm extremely proud to state that for the first time, FIFA is going to take place in our side of the hemisphere. It is also the first time it is going to take part in a Muslim majority country. We have already started preparing well in advance for this tournament. We are always ahead of what we have to deliver. But what is very important is that this will really showcase my country, its innovation, its capabilities, its culture, its heritage, everything that we are so proud of in this country. We will be able to showcase it to the world. And most importantly, the Qatar's capability to host an international event like FIFA. You know, even major countries sometimes have difficulty. You have already seen FIFA took place in several very large economies and very large countries. Till the last day, they were still preparing for the occasion. Qatar is already 90% ready for it. We have done a lot of things that will really raise the profile of my country. But what is also very important is that the FIFA Club World that is taking place today, you have already seen that this is really the first step of the rehearsal, what we will be able to deliver. And you have seen how we have been managing a very complex situation where more than a game is taking place over here. We have just finished the Gulf tournament, which was again success, where multiple matches were taking place in several stadia. So we are really prepared. And what very important is that every Qatari is extremely excited, and not only Qataris, but also the people that have been living in Qatar, have developed, taken part in developing my country, are really looking forward to this huge occasion that will be taking place in our country soon. So you can already imagine what people should expect.
So beyond just being prepared, and I can see that
But
Qatar
also, let me interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Sports brings nations and people together. During the Gulf Cup, you realized how we were all together, regardless, without borders. We were appreciating the Gulf Cup. We were cheering the teams. People from all the countries took part. All the countries were invited, and we respected every single team that played here as equal, as people from the Gulf, as Arabs together. And this is the spirit what sports bring to the country.
Right, so sports tourism is all about unity. I understand that Qatar is very well prepared, but beyond the World Cup, after the World Cup is over, how are you positioning the country to make sure that those visitors continue to come back?
First and foremost, tourism is a huge industry where my country was really not paying the kind of attention we want to pay. My country is very rich in heritage. My country is extremely rich in culture. My country has natural beauty that a lot of countries in our region, they don't have, but it was not developed. It is now my job, as recently being appointed as the Secretary General of the National Tourism Council, to put Qatar very strongly on the map of the world. What we are going to do is to bring people together. And this very painful day in 2017, when certain doors for us was closed, we tried to open up new doors. We tried to embrace the people of the world. We were the first country in the region to open up 80 nationalities to come without visas. And today we are more than 90 countries that come to Qatar without visa. It is my aim as the National Tourism Council Secretary General, and also fully supported by my ruler, His Highness Sheikh Tamim, that we want to be a country that will invite all the countries of the world to come here without visa, so that we demolish the borders that are dividing people, and we prove to the world that Qatar is open arm to receive and grow our industry. So post-2022, we will continue our march to promote tourism, but what is very important, that I'm very impatient with the mandate and the confidence shown to me by my ruler to appoint me in this very important job and a very important industry for the future of my country that I need to deliver now. I cannot wait until after 2022.
Okay, thank you, Your Excellency. Your Royal Highness, I want to turn to you because the first thing, when people think about Jordan, the first thing they automatically think about is, of course, Petra. Petra is very near to your heart. You think about the archaeological ruins, you think about the fact that it was built thousands and thousands of years ago by the Nabateans, and you fight every single day to persuade the government of Jordan to enact tougher legislation to protect sites like Petra. Why is cultural heritage such an important part of social cohesion and economic prosperity, in your opinion?
Thank you very much, and I'm incredibly grateful to be here. This is a wonderful forum, and you know, cultural heritage and tourism are very closely linked, and they're very closely related. And the statistics have shown that about 37% of international tourists have a cultural motivation. That translates to 4.2% of global GDP and 125 million jobs, and that's just the cultural sector. So it makes financial sense in terms of tourism. But beyond that, there is so much that's associated with cultural heritage that is an incredible opportunity for economic prosperity for countries. You have cultural industries, which are currently estimated at, I think it's a $1.7 trillion industry globally. Cultural production, jobs, real estate becomes more valuable in areas where cultural heritage is well managed and well protected. And so there are all of these direct economic values that are related to cultural heritage. Beyond that, we've got to expand the way we think about cultural heritage. And traditionally, it's always been that, you know, it's one part, integral part, but it's one part of the tourism industry. And I'm always saying that it's the other way around. The tourism industry and the cultural heritage industry are strong, they're separate, but they're very closely related. Tourism, for those of us who fight for cultural heritage, is a means through which to promote cultural heritage. Very important, but it's a means. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about multilateralism. So this debate, this forum is all about, you know, governance, multilateralism, collaboration. How do we deal with incredible challenges that the world is facing moving forward? Political, social, economic. You know, what is the landscape going to look like in a few years? And how do we deal with it? And I'm always saying that a big part of the answer lies in understanding our cultural heritage. So when you look at, you know, Petra was built by the Nabateans, but you know, the history of Petra goes back many, many years ago. There's a Neolithic site in Beda in Petra that's 10,000 years old. So we are talking about history that has spanned generations, thousands of years, people who have come and gone, differences. And so when we're talking about social cohesion, we're talking about identity. When we look at the future and the challenges that the future poses for all of us, how do we know how to equip the current generation with the tools necessary to deal with future challenges if they don't know who they are? We have to look into our identity, our roots, to understand who we are, what is important to us, what motivates us, why would we act. If we understand that, we can understand identity. Cultural heritage gives a sense of rootedness, of belonging. When you're talking about development and the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're talking about resilience and adaptability, we have thousands of years of lessons throughout history of people dealing with climate change, with scarcity, taking specific actions that enable them to respond to different changes. You look at the Nabateans and their incredible hydrological systems, their water system. They knew how to deal with water scarcity. And so there are incredible lessons for creativity, for innovation, for adaptability that can help us equip a new generation of young people to deal with global challenges.
One group that certainly, and you've talked about this, one group that really does understand how important and how precious cultural heritage really is ISIS. We've seen them, I mean, it broke my heart just seeing the images of what they had destroyed in Palmyra in Syria, in Hatra in Iraq. When ISIS, when Daesh destroys these archaeological sites and divides us and essentially ruins an element of cultural identity, what does humanity lose?
So I think one of the things that motivated me to become much more vocal about this issue was the destruction that we have seen in our part of the world and what Daesh has done. And I think the one silver lining is that so much more attention, so much more focus is now directed at the importance of cultural heritage and why we have to invest in our cultural heritage. What essentially Daesh was trying to do, Daesh was trying to erase memory. They are afraid of thousands of years of human connections. They're afraid that we look around and we recognize that at the end of the day, there's a common thread of human history that unites all of us. There are values that we all share as human beings, values that we celebrate today in our current global governance systems. So what they were basically trying to do is physically and psychologically to erase those connections between people, to erase a narrative that embraces diversity, that embraces differences, and replace it with one that rejects diversity, with one single narrative, which is the path to discrimination, to atrocities against people. And that essentially was a lesson for me about not only why cultural heritage is so important in my country, but globally how important it is to ensure that the global narrative about who we are and about what connects us is one that embraces diversity and embraces differences. And I think this narrative is very important to think about and to promote, particularly when we're talking about a multilateral world and a world that should have collaboration between people and between nations at the core of it.
I want to talk about the importance of building a really resilient tourism sector in the face of many threats. I want to turn to you, Your Excellency, Mr. TRABELSI of Tunisia. Mr. TRABELSI is going to address us in French. So those of you who speak English or Arabic, if you could use your headset so we can all understand. Your Excellency, Tunisia, as we know, has suffered a handful of lone wolf attacks. You think back to the attack in Tunis, the Bardo National Museum. You think back to the same year, 2015, the attack where a lot of British people died in Sousse at a beach holiday resort, and several other smaller attacks, including this year near the French embassy. What is the strategy to building a much more resilient tourism sector in the face of these threats, when you have European tour operators essentially cancelling their tours following an attack?
Okay. Merci. Tout d'abord, je voudrais remercier
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I would like
les organisateurs de nous avoir
start by
invités,
thanking the
surtout
organizers for
permis
inviting us
assister à ce panel.
and giving me a chance to take
Aussi,
part
je
in this
voudrais,
panel.
en me trouvant ici au Qatar, féliciter
Since
le
I'm here
projet
in
Dear
Qatar,
Qatari
I
tous
would
heures.
like to
Comme vous le savez, dernièrement, on a
congratulate
inauguré
Qatar on its
un
project.
superbe hôtel dans le désert
Recently, we
tunisien
have
qui s'appelle Antara,
inaugurated
avec
a hotel
93
called Al
villas.
Antara
Et
in the
aujourd'hui,
Tunisian village. It's made up
il
of
se trouve
93
que ce
villas.
projet, un des meilleurs
And this project
investissements en Tunisie, qui a
is one
été
of
fait
the
par les Dear
best
Qatari.
investments ever made in
Il
Tunisia.
a
It was
été inauguré,
made
ça fait
by
15 jours,
the
et il est
Emir
pratiquement
of
plein à
Qatar.
partir d'aujourd'hui
It was
jusqu'à
opened
6
15 years
janvier,
ago, and as of
avec
today,
une
we are
moyenne
fully booked
de
until January
400-500
6th.
euros les chambres, et
The
avec
average
des
price
suites à
is
4 000 $.
400 to
Et pour
55
vous dire
euro
que
to
le
500 euros a
tourisme
room. Some
en
suites are up
Tunisie
to
de haute
$4,000.
contribution commence à revenir petit à
And
petit.
so high
Pour
value
répondre à
tourism
votre question,
is progressively
vrai
coming
que la
back to Tunisia.
Tunisie
Now, to
a
answer your
énormément
question,
souffert,
it is
déjà
true that
depuis 2011,
Tunisia has
mais
greatly
surtout en
suffered
2015,
since
on a eu
2011, but most
trois
of all,
attentats
in 2015, we
très,
were
très durs.
struck by three very serious terror attacks.
L'attentat de Sousse
There was the one in
et le
Sousse,
musée de Bardo
there
et un
was the
attentat
Bardo
contre
Museum,
la
and then
police présidentielle.
an
La
attack
Tunisie
targeting the presidential
depuis, la
police.
Tunisie a commencé à
Since then,
sécuriser les
Tunisia
frontières
has
et la
worked
ville
on
et les zones touristiques.
securing its borders, its cities,
Depuis
and
2017, on va dire
areas where
qu'il y a un
tourism
retour
is
de
strong.
tourisme en Tunisie.
And
La
then
sécurité,
tourism
bien
has
sûr,
started to come
elle
back
est
to
primaire
Tunisia.
dans les
Of
hôtels.
course, safety
Nous avons
is the heart
sécurisé
of the matter
tous les
in
hôtels,
hotels. We
tous les
have
zones
now
touristiques, les musées
secured all
où les
hotels,
touristes
tourist areas,
visitent les souks, les
museums,
centres
the
commerciaux,
souks,
les centres-villes. Tous ces
the
centres-là
shopping
ont été
centers, malls,
sécurisés.
city centers.
En
Everything
2019,
is secure now.
Nous avons fait un travail
In 2019,
de faire revenir les touristes
we worked
classiques,
on
les pays
attracting
européens qui ont
conventional,
l'habitude de visiter la
traditional
Tunisie.
tourists
Nous
in
avons
Tunisia back to
réussi cette
Tunisia
année, en
from
2019,
European
à
countries. And in
arriver à un
2019,
objectif de 9
we were
millions de
able to
touristes
meet our
et
objective
donner la
of
confiance
9
à tous ces
million
touristes, à
tourists.
toutes ces
We were able
nationalités
to restore the
qui
confidence,
reviennent
the trust
passer les vacances en
of
Tunisie.
these
Et en même
tourists.
temps, nous avons
They are coming back to Tunisia.
remarqué le retour
And at
d'autres
the same time,
tourismes, le
we have
tourisme
noticed that there
de
are other
Golfe,
types of
le
tourism
tourisme
coming to us. For
asiatique
example,
et
people
surtout
from
le
the Gulf
tourisme russe
region,
qui est
from
devenu depuis
Asia, and
2016,
from Russia
la
since
Russie, la
2016.
Tunisie est devenue une destination
Tunisia
à part
is
entière.
a destination of
Pour
choice
nous,
for
c'est très
Russians.
important la sécurité. C'est très
So for
important
all
de faire
these reasons,
confiance,
safety
d'avoir
greatly
la
matters to
confiance
us.
des tour
We have
opérateurs.
to be
Nous pensons
trusted by
qu'aujourd'hui, la
tour
Tunisie
operators.
a la même
We believe
sécurité
that as of
que
today,
n'importe
Tunisia
autre
is
pays
as safe
européen.
as any
Nous
European
savons
country.
que c'est très important,
We
facteur
know
de
that this
sécurité.
is
Nous avons
extremely
facilité aussi
important.
l'accès à la Tunisie par la suspension
We
des
have
visas
also
touristiques.
created a visa waiver program
Et
for
aussi
tourists.
aujourd'hui pour les zones culturelles, les
And in
sites
cultural
archéologiques, nous
areas
avons
and
remarqué un retour
archaeological areas,
extraordinaire des
sites,
excursions
we
dans
have
les
seen that
sites.
there are
Vous savez
tourists
qu'en
who are
Tunisie, il y
coming
a à peu
back.
près une centaine
In
de sites.
Tunisia, there are about
Certains ils
100
sont très
archaeological
anciens
sites.
et
Some
très
of them
importants,
are
très demandés
very
par
old
les touristes.
and are in high demand amongst
Aujourd'hui aussi,
tourists.
la Tunisie est devenue un pays
Tunisia has
où le
also
tourisme
become one of these
médical
countries where
est très important,
medical
le
tourism
tourisme culturel,
is a major
le
factor.
tourisme
We have
écologique,
cultural
le
tourism,
tourisme
we have
alternatif, un
environmental
sujet très
tourism,
important aujourd'hui pour la
alternative
Tunisie.
tourism, something
De
that
plus en
greatly
plus,
matters to Tunisia.
on a des produits, on a des hôtels, des maisons d'hôtes,
We now
des
have
gîtes ruraux qui se
hotels
vendent dans
and guest
l'intérieur de la
houses
Tunisie.
in the hinterland of
Comme vous
Tunisia,
avez
not just on the
parlé tout à
coast.
l'heure, la main-d'œuvre est très importante. Donner
As was
à
mentioned
travailler aux gens
earlier,
en Tunisie,
workforce
c'est quelque
is
chose
extremely
de très
important,
important dans le
and
tourisme. Aujourd'hui, le
employment greatly
PIB en
matters to our
Tunisie, c'est
tourism
14
industry.
points.
Our GDP
Il
is
y a à peu près 500 000
14.3.
qui travaillent grâce au tourisme en direct
About
et 2
500,000
millions
people
en
are
indirect.
directly employed by
Le
the tourism
fameux
industry
projet
and 2 million
qatari dans la zone
indirectly.
d'Outoseur, il fait travailler à peu
the
près
Qatar
300 emplois
project
directs. Et surtout,
has
ces
created
emplois ils sont dans la zone
300 direct
du désert
jobs.
tunisien. C'est des
And
projets
this
très
project
importants.
is
En
located
tous les
in
cas,
the
moi, je
desert,
peux vous
so this
rassurer
makes it that much
qu'aujourd'hui,
more
le
significant.
tourisme
So I
revient
can
en force
reassure
sur la
everyone
Tunisie pour
that
l'année
tourism is back on the
2020.
rise in
Il y a une
Tunisia,
demande
and it
extraordinaire
will
pratiquement du
remain
monde
in
entier. On commence à
2020.
voir
There is great demand coming
des
from the
touristes qui
entire
viennent
world.
des États-Unis,
Many tourists are coming
de
to us
Canada
from the
et
United
surtout du
States, from
Moyen-Orient.
Canada,
C'est un
and
retour à la
especially from
confiance
the
vers la
Middle East.
Tunisie.
And so people are trusting
Thank you,
Tunisia
Your
again.
Excellency. So for those of you who didn't or who don't have headsets, I'm going to attempt to just sum up with my university level French. Basically, His Excellency was saying that, yes, it is true that there were several terrorist attacks and that did have a negative effect on the tourism sector. However, tourism is slowly beginning to come back thanks to an incredible amount of security that they've put in place in certain areas that tourists visit, including souks and various other areas. And now the tourism sector is coming back. They actually received about 9 million visitors so far this year. So thank you very much. I hope that was a good translation from my university French. Thank you so much. So, Your Excellency, one of the things, just going on to what Mr. Trabelsi said, about just the importance of developing a resilient tourism sector. Some people say that excessive tourism can actually lead to terrorism. Obviously, we know that Jordan is incredibly safe. There have been a few blips on the radar, but it's incredibly safe, one of the safest places in the region. But Petra actually received about 10,000 visitors in one day this year, which is a record number. For those people who think that excessive tourism can actually make a place less safe, what do you say to those people?
Thank you so much, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here today, and I would like to thank Excellency Akbar Bakr for his gracious hospitality, because honestly, I think being here together, just exchanging thoughts and dialogue is very important for the future. Going back to your question, each challenge has an opportunity attached to it. So definitely Jordan has shown its resilience and perseverance, and it has shown that it's an ambassador for peace in the region as well. We call it the safe haven of the region. That's why I think excessive tourism, or let's say over-tourism, which there are many, many ways of addressing how can, let's say, excess number of tourists at one place make us think, what do we need to do in order to mitigate any risk with these very important historical places? One factor which we realized that for Petra, and we call Petra, Wadi Rum, and Aqaba the Golden Triangle. And definitely there is a huge demand for people to go there, which allows us to think of ways and means to mitigate this, let's say, flow of tourists in a very proper way. That's why I would like to talk about utilizing technology as a mean to mitigate these risks. If we have the right technology, if we have the right connectivity, we can predict, we can plan, we can execute in a different way. That makes me again to think of the opportunities, because Jordan, full of gems. It's not about Petra. Petra is the jewel crown of Jordan, but there are other gems. That's why we started to focus on meaningful experiences other than the historical, let's say, cultural experiences. We talk about faith-based tourism. Faith-based tourism is very important, where we find in Jordan 5 sites known as Christian pilgrimage sites. That's why we need to change the way we market Jordan. We need to change the way we package, let's say, when we address different tourists, that we have faith-based tourism, we have health and wellness tourism, we have adventure tourism, we have the filming industry that is becoming very new, and it's having a huge impact on local communities. So we look at these things, and it obliges us to look at marketing, packaging, and communicating Jordan in a different way. That's why we're saying that collaboration and synergies and coordination between all stakeholders is very important. Local community is very important. The right bylaws in place is very important as well. We need to have modern, enabling bylaws in order not to hinder the future growth of the tourism sector, because tourism is not an industry. Tourism is becoming the industry for future growth. That's why I think it's very important to work together, government, private sector, local communities, in order to make the best out of this industry.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Your Excellency. It's not just about Petra, it's not just about the Jordan of antiquity, the ones that we've read about in the Bible, going to where Jesus was baptized, but there is a very, very different type of Jordan, a very modern Jordan. Secretary General, I want to talk to you next about the importance of technology. And just a side note to everyone, there is a connections lounge in this building that I encourage all of you to visit today, where you can actually go to experience a virtual reality experience of, for example, Old Sana'a in Yemen, or the Congo, or various other conflict regions in the world. It's a virtual reality experience. I encourage all of you to go today. But that brings me to my next point about the importance of technology in terms of bringing people together and allowing people to experience places that they wouldn't otherwise get to experience. Just talk to us about the importance of innovation in the tourism industry.
I will come back to football and congratulate, because I love football, and I will talk why I'm talking about football. I want to congratulate Qatar, and I will add 2 or 3 more remarks our dear chairman mentioned. This is first time when the country with a population of 2 million will host World Cup. This is something very special. I mean, even Uruguay, where World Cup started in 32, has 3.5 million. This is first time when Middle East and the region will host World Cup. If you remember, only in Asia continent, in the continent so big, only Japan and South Korea, they hosted World Cup during 100 years. This is first time when all of us, if you will invite us there, AKBAR, we can see all matches during the day without using airplane. This is something very special. This is innovation. Now, talking about football, we are the first UNWTO and again Qatar Airways who started to link together sports and tourism. And we announced first startup competition, tourism and sports, because again we want to link and we see that the tourism sport is becoming the very important part of tourism, and we launched it with the Football Club Barcelona. Why? Because Football Club Barcelona is the only club in the world who is focused on innovation. And Barcelona itself, like city, and I'm sure that we will use Qatar like a nice showcase in innovation after World Cup. And your question was very interesting. We are sure that we will use Qatar like nice showcase how to use infrastructure and how to continue the flow of tourists after World Cup, like visa. I want to congratulate, and again, we are using Qatar like a nice showcase for other member states, how to open and how have country more accessible. And Qatar is one of the best examples for our member states, and we are very proud to be the part of that very important and interesting project. When we are talking about Agenda 2030, my opinion is that we don't need visa in 2030. Our kids does not need to know what is visa is. This is the main objective, and I'm sure that we will reach it. Innovation is, maybe you know that 95%, it's a huge figure, of all our travels are made by digital products or digital platforms, 95%. But it doesn't mean that we need all around robots doing everything, serving the meal or serving our drinks. No, we want to use innovation to create new jobs again. This is our objective. And innovation is, it's here, it's all around. Without new digital platforms and new opportunities, we can't move and we can move forward. So for that reason, we created two international innovation hubs. One of them is in Argentina, in Buenos Aires for the Americas, and another one is in Madrid. And we started to announce and we started to support small and medium-sized companies, enterprises, individuals, entrepreneurs, to help them to expand and to internationalize their projects all around the world. We made 10 startup competitions last year by regions, by thematic issues. One of them was sports and tourism. The another one was in gastronomy. In gastronomy is a very big part of 30% of income in tourism sector comes from gastronomy and hospitality service. And we are supporting all these entrepreneurs to internationalize their projects all around the world. We made first startup competition in African region, and it was amazing that we received more than 500 projects during 1.5 months. And this is what we are doing, and this is how we are supporting innovation in tourism sector, which is very important. I don't want to forget the Tunisian case. This is another very important, and I want to congratulate Minister because after 2010, which was the best year for Tunisia, they are recovering, and as Minister mentioned, they have already 9 million, which is, I think, a big and successful story, and we want to use, like Qatar for visa, Tunisia, how to recover, unfortunately, after this very difficult and tough situation, and many countries has this kind of issues, and again, it's complex, you know, it's not only about communication, it's not about only security. This is full package which country needs to be prepared if there is a need, of course, and Tunisia is another very interesting nice showcase for our member states.
Right, so Tunisia has done an excellent job of actually bringing back tourists in the wake of
Of course,
a number-
Jordan, another
Yes, a number of
example for
terrorist
culture
attacks.
and tourism. Culture is, again, one of the culture and tourism are like brother and sister, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same, I think so, and we always use Jordan, one of the best example,
Yeah.
how to link culture with the tourism sector.
But speaking of resilience and speaking of bringing back tourism, Your Excellency Akbar, I want to just bring you into this because on the one hand, Qatar has an excellent opportunity with the World Cup in a couple of years, but at the same time it is dealing with regional politics, with the blockade. Just walk us through how you go about, again, just talking about resilience, talking about the fact that Qatar Airways lost a number of destinations because of the blockade, but I guess looking at things more positively, it forced you to diversify where your tourists come from and innovations and just sort of differences in thinking when it comes to visa policies and that sort of thing. Just walk us through that.
You are asking me a question about my favorite subject. Let me tell you that when it comes to resilience, I don't think there is any other country in the world that could prove resilience more than my country. I don't need to dwell upon the past, but you can see that you are here. You can see the interest Qatar has gained. You can see how we overcome the biggest challenge in the history of my nation. And we came out of it with flying colors. First, you mentioned that I lost a number of destinations, but very little people know that we lost 18 destinations and we replaced it with 20. We have added 35 destinations from the time of that dark day of 2017. Qatar Airways is today the flag carrier of my nation worldwide, and what we did in this short period of just over 2.5 years is to continue our life, to keep on innovating, to keep on promoting ourselves around the world. And there is nothing better promoting Qatar around the world is Qatar Airways. I'm very proud also to say that just before I came here, I was given statistics that, issued by an international aviation body that Qatar Airways is the only airline that has grown in 2019 compared to our peer group in the region. 2 airlines have shrank, while Qatar Airways has grown with double digits. So it shows you the resilience Qatar has and its people have. And what we are going to do for the FIFA, I know that I have very little time, so I don't want to prolong, because I'm sure you need to grill another couple of people here before we end. What it shows to the world is that we are absolutely prepared to all the challenges, and we will make sure that we have done our job to the highest standards that is expected by FIFA. And we have continued to prove ourselves, and we will continue to prove ourselves in the future to deliver what everybody in the world expects from the state of Qatar.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I do want to, before we only have 5 minutes left, but I think it's important to, for everyone in the audience to really understand the role that tourism plays in climate change and in sustainability, just because I think that's a very important part of this discussion. Your Royal Highness, just explain to us, how does tourism factor into climate change? Because I think that there are very few people who understand what that link actually is.
Well, I think to start with, tourism is an enormous industry. I mean, the Secretary of the UNWTO has given us some of the statistics. It's an enormous employer. It's an enormous producer. It is part of many sectors: construction, food, transport, and all of an industry of this size has to have an impact on the emissions of greenhouse gases, carbon, and everything else. So naturally, yes, there is a huge impact when it comes to global climate change. And given that this is such an important industry and one that is growing very, very rapidly and outpacing many other industries throughout the world, actually, in terms of its growth and interest, I think moving forward, it will continue to have an impact on sort of what I consider to be probably the most sort of existential threat to us as human beings and the systems and the earth that sustains us. And so for those who are involved in tourism, there's a great responsibility to understand what actions need to be taken today, given how vast the growth is going to be in the tourism industry. I think the UNWTO has actually taken a couple of measures, including encouraging people to take public transport and other sustainable tourism becoming a very important concept, and the definition of sustainable tourism has become much more part of the narrative and the approach because of the efforts of UNWTO. So I think this is something that we need to consider very carefully. We need to consider very specific measures also related to the industry that can mitigate some of the effect of global climate change. It has the subject that is my favorite. It has an enormous impact on cultural heritage. There are sites that are disappearing, glaciers from World Heritage sites that will completely disappear. Coastal areas that are already under threat from erosion and sea level rise. So there are very serious threats to cultural heritage. For example, the tourism industry will be impacted more than probably any other industry with severe weather conditions. It will disrupt movement. It will threaten destinations that are tourism assets as well. And so it's a wide-ranging actually threat to global climate change that we have to be looking at. And because of how pervasive tourism is in terms of its connection to the various different sectors in any economy and its growth, I think it is very important to consider its impact on global climate change. And we have in sort of the cultural heritage field very important tools that we can use to help mitigate some of the impact on the global climate, including sort of age-old skills, knowledge that has been passed on from generation to generation that can help communities adapt and take the necessary measures to really do what is right, do the important thing.
And just before we go, final question for Your Excellency, René TRABELSI. Again, this answer will be in French. But I know that sustainable tourism is something that you're very passionate about. Tourism represents about 7-8% of Tunisia's GDP, but it is a factor when it comes to pollution, when it comes to issues with transportation. How have you worked to make Tunisia's tourism sector that much more green and that much more sustainable?
Oui, exactement. Ça sera notre politique
Indeed,
pour
this is
2020.
true. This will
Comme je
be
vous ai
our
dit tout à l'heure,
policy in
2019, c'était vraiment
2020.
le travail.
As I told you, in 2019, our job was first and foremost to bring tourists back to Tunisia. In 2020, however, we will improve on hospitality, services, quality, and protecting the environment. In 2011, Tunisia was struck by problems related to the environment. Sustainable development makes the headlines every day in Tunisia. There are many projects going in that direction. And to give you an example, we are working on bike paths in major areas and in tourist areas. We are also working with foreign partners in order to phase out plastic
dans les grandes zones touristiques, même dans les grandes villes. Et il y a un travail qui est fait par la société civile. Et ça, c'est quelque chose d'extraordinaire en Tunisie. La société civile est très mobilisée pour l'environnement, pour ce qu'on appelle le tourisme durable. Vous allez voir que dans quelques mois en Tunisie, il y a des projets de l'intérieur de la Tunisie exceptionnels qui sont très demandés, qui sont même proposés par des partenaires ou des bailleurs de fonds étrangers
by
Nous sommes
foreign
d'ailleurs
donors and partners.
preneurs des investisseurs. La Tunisie a
If
besoin des
anybody wants to
investisseurs
invest in
pour ce
Tunisia,
genre de
that'd be
projet.
great. Tunisia
La
needs
GIZ
people to
est en
invest in
train de
these
travailler
projects. The German
d'une façon
GIZ
exceptionnelle.
has been working on this
Swiss
and
Contact,
is
c'est
conducting
un
work of
fonds
an exceptional
suisse
quality.
qui est en
Then
train
there
de nous aider
is Swiss
énormément
Contact,
pour
a
ce
Swiss
tourisme
fund which is
culturel
helping us
et
promote
alternatif. Et
alternative cultural
la
tourism.
Tunisie, je l'ai déjà dit, la Tunisie
And as I
peut
said,
devenir un des
Tunisia
meilleurs pays
can become
pour ce tourisme
one of the
durable.
hotspots of sustainable tourism.
Your Excellency, thank you so much. So you obviously believe that the environment is a huge priority, and you're working with foreign partners on various sustainable projects, including reducing plastic and eliminating pollution in some of the cities, and making sure that people perhaps use bicycles and that sort of thing. All right, thank you so much. A round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Zain, and thank you to all the distinguished panelists for this truly enriching conversation on the importance and benefits of cultural heritage, the value as well in keeping our countries and our societies open to each other in today's growing environment of isolationism. Now, speaking of cultural heritage, our next speaker is from a country that is renowned for having several significant cultural heritage sites. In fact, I think 3 of them UNESCO protected World Heritage Sites. They hold both religious and historical importance and significance. He is the president of an old nation, but a rather young nation state. But as I say, a nation state with a rich history, a nation state that is landlocked between 2 regional powers, Turkey and Iran. It was a pleasure to moderate a session with him a few months ago in Kazakhstan. It's a pleasure to see him again here at the Doha Forum. So please welcome the President of Armenia, ARMEN SARKISSIAN.
Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really happy being here at the Doha Forum, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank, first of all, the leader of this country, the Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, for this kind invitation to come again to Doha and participate at this very prestigious forum. And it gives me an opportunity to share shortly with some ideas that I think are important. And it starts with the introduction of His Highness at the opening ceremony. I would like to take it from there and to continue, because His Highness started and he was speaking about this world and the changing world, about the fact that this world is now more likely a multipolar world. Yes, indeed, and that the same theme was continued by the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and I would like to continue it further. Indeed, this is, during the last 30 years, we lived a life when the world started being one polar or single polar, and then in a very short period of time, it started with being bipolar between Soviet Union and United States, and it changed into single polar. Then after a short period of time, now there are discussions that, again, it's a bipolar world, or maybe it's not bipolar, it's a tripolar or multipolar world. The reality is, indeed, that the world is not only multipolar, it's also much more complex than we were expecting. In fact, 30, 40 years ago, the theory is that the history has stopped. I think this theory has stopped because it looks like we are entering a new page of history rather than the history that has been stopped. Yes, indeed. As mentioned by His Highness, there are not only complexities of the multipolar world, but there are also complexities that there are more questions that we ask today than there are answers. There is more uncertainty than certainty. There is much more unpredictable events happening, that things that we could predict and basically deal with that. So why is this happening? Let me take you even deeper on that, because in some way we are on the crossroad of time. In some way we are entering this time gate to new age, new century, which will have several features. And in order to completely make it clear, I would like to call the life that we live the last 100 or 200 years, call it the world of the classical values. And the one we are going to enter is the world of the quantum values and thinking. Why I am doing that? Because I would like to take all of us back another 100 years ago. More or less 100 years ago, when the physicists, and I'm one of them, theoretical physicist in my first and beautiful life. 100 years ago, there were more questions in theoretical physics and mechanics than there were answers. There was the philosophy, the logic of classical mechanics created by giants like Isaac Newton, but there were events specially connected with smaller particles, atoms, elementary particles, big number of them. They never had answers. So the world of physicists and scientists was confused. Like the world is feeling the same confusion today, there are more questions than answers. And the answer seemingly is more or less the same. This world indeed has changed. This is a world that 30 years ago we couldn't imagine, because we are now a world that every individual living two lives, the normal material life and alongside with a complete virtual life. Starting from our day of birth and through education, and the virtual is growing more and more. So we are individuals that in huge numbers are connected, and our interaction and interconnection is happening with the speed of light, like elementary particles. And this is created a completely different environment, and it's changing many, many things in our life. This is a world that the classical way of being successful businessmen, going through either through educational form, becoming eventually a president of a big multinational company, is accompanied with something new, quantum. You start with a great idea with a couple of friends in a small lab or a garage. Then you create something which is called Microsoft or Apple or Facebook. Or you are previously unknown politician or a journalist or a comedian, but you know how to encourage people. You have the right energy, political energy, the vision, and in a couple of months you come and win an election. And I'm not going to go into details or examples of that. Or you are a leader that can accumulate the feelings of hundreds of thousands of people or unhappiness of that using the tools, the quantum tools of social network, encouraging them and creating a revolution. Well, this happens all the time now, including in my own country a year and a half ago. But this is also a world that small creative tools, be that through hacking, can create huge disasters. We are living in a world that a couple of young people living in a third country can enter the central bank of the fourth, and God help us if they enter the nuclear power plant of the third country. But this is a reality that can happen. But this is also a world highly energized with, unfortunately, dark energy individuals, be that energy political or religious or something else, can create huge disasters worldwide. So, welcome to the new quantum world. But in order to understand how this quantum world in the future is going to be run, we really have to think about it. I think we have really, in order to get where we are, to change some of our logics, because if we will start dealing, let's say, on security issue, on political issues, with the old paradigms, and creating sort of security architecture for a region or much wider, I can assure you with the time they will fail, because they are not taking into account many factors of the new world that is going through not only fourth industrial revolution, but is going through our evolution, rapid evolution, because this fourth industrial revolution is going to happen every day, every second year, every second 5 year. Our life will change dramatically, because the quantum technology, starting from huge amount of data, the way we use that technology in health, in military, in communication, in everywhere, is going to overwhelm us. So what's next? What to do with that? So point important is that we have to rethink how we are going to run this planet in the future. It's a huge challenge. It's a similar challenge that 100 years ago, the great minds, starting from Albert Einstein, Heisenberg, and others, dramatically changed the classical sort of an ordinary way of thinking and logic into something that helped them to understand the new quantum mechanics. And you'll be shocked. If you'll go through that, you'll find out that the rules of quantum mechanics are also running the biological objects. And I think probably you will be even shocked further to realize or to discover that even our human behavior in huge numbers in the new interconnected world could be described by the logic and philosophy of quantum. But I will leave that for a much longer lecture or a discussion, and I will take you to one specific aspect of what I am trying to deliver: the importance of small. All of my examples were speaking about high energy, the power, the energy, the talent of small. One or two talented people creating huge multi-billion companies. One or two political leaders that have the right passion and understand new world. They are sort of a new quantum politicians, using the power of the global network and the social network, doing either a revolution here and there, or becoming the next leader of their own nation, or countries that before were not known, with having a strong military power, can create their own small military tools that can be as effective as the tools of the great powers, and so on. So I will limit myself speaking about the power of small. And the power of small starts with the power of individual, the groups, motivated people that come together as one, with one motive, one target, one goal in their lives, up to states. And this is where I would like to say that I do believe that indeed this world is multipolar. And this multipolar world, not only the great big powers, which are the classical ones in the world, but also the small but successful countries have their own and will have their own strong voice. And I'm very happy that I'm delivering that simple idea or message here in Doha, a country that is a wonderful example of being small, but being not only beautiful, but being also successful, and from some point of view being, thank you, but also through its strength being also powerful in the form of being human, representing an idea, and so on. And of course, Doha is not alone. We can come. There are several countries in the same Gulf that are sharing with this success. We can come from Singapore, that has huge impact on a global perspective, or the way we look at the world. And you can go to Rwanda. The president of Rwanda was here. And I hope, and many others, Ireland, Israel, many others. So these are countries that are small, but have clear vision and clear understanding, a plan and a focus to harness their advantage and to make it successful. In some countries, like here in Qatar, the base of the success is several components, and one of them is the richness of natural resources, and the other one is the richness of having a vision and being organized and integrated for a specific target, making this country not just the country that uses the natural resources, but uses the natural resources into building the future. And that future will not be based on natural resources, it will be based on education, artificial intelligence, new data management, and new technology, and you on. You take Singapore, they were using their natural strength, which was being an international port, a port in the ocean of water, and transferring that into making something that is a hub of trade, hub of technology, and hub of new energy. So another example of being small. Well, I will not go further, but I would love to think that my own country, Armenia, that also has an advantage in this moment. It's not only the 1,000 years of cultural heritage, it's not only what we are, but also it's a country where we highly value things like education, science, technology, and that was recognized for 70 years even by Soviet government, making Armenia a scientific hub. And a country that during the 30 years of independence had created system, educational, scientific, that we're exporting now to advanced countries like France, like Germany and the UK and elsewhere. So a country that has also one very specific advantage. We are a small nation, small state, but we are a global nation. There are 3.6 Armenians living in Armenia, but there are 4 or 5 times more of them living abroad. And I hope that I will be right saying that most of the Armenians living abroad, they are hardworking people, they are survivors, they are people that can change themselves according to the situation. They are good citizens of the countries they live, which is very important for the president of Armenia, knowing that his compatriots being citizens of France, United States, Russia, or elsewhere. This is a nation. There are as many Armenians living in Russia as in Armenia, and the same with the United States and so on. So that is a strength that I hope will make Armenia one of the small but successful countries that will be on the avant-garde of development of the world. So, in order to make my introduction small, I would like to finish here, coming again to the beginning of where I started with the note of His Highness about the world being complex and multipolar. Yes, indeed, the world is multipolar, and the world is complex. I would say it's so complex that we have to call it quantum, and we have to learn how in the new world, interconnected, new technology, very fast world, what are the new rules that we are going to run this world. And I'm sure that there will be a dozen of great women and men that will get Nobel Prizes for that. And it's worth it to think about it. But this is also a new world where small can be beautiful and small can be powerful. And I wish all of the small states to realize there is something important in the future. Look around the good examples and try be on your own, small but powerful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Sarkisyan, from the quantum world, the mysteries of the quantum world, to the mysteries of the wider, but as you say, decidedly multilateral world. Now next, we have a Newsmaker interview with a former member of Parliament in the United Kingdom. And I say former not because he is a member of the Labour Party and may have lost his seat just 3 days ago. No, he in fact is one of the few Conservative MPs who decided to rebel a couple of months ago and not run for a seat in the general election. So in addition to being known as a rebel MP, he is also a former Minister of State for International Development in the former Theresa May cabinet. He's, in addition to that, also a former Minister of State for the Middle East and North Africa. And the good news, though, lots of formers, he is currently here with us. Please welcome Alistair Burt and the session's moderator, Al Jazeera's James Bays.
Well, the man sitting next to me is probably very familiar to all of you. He's spent more than 30 years as an MP in the UK Parliament, but he's familiar to you because he was a Foreign Office Minister for 2 stints, and he was responsible for this region, the Middle East. He was, throughout that time, as a UK politician, a loyal soldier for his Conservative Party until the last few months. Why did all that change? Why did he become a rebel? Well, the B word. Is that B Brexit or is it Boris? I think we're going to find out. Before I ask the first question, worth just relating a conversation I had with 2 senior British diplomats before I even knew that I was doing this interview. And they were talking about you, and they said, Mr. Burt, the best Foreign Secretary we never had. So, a great compliment. Let's start at the end and work backwards. The news of all this is an election result, and one that perhaps has surprised people with the size of the Conservative majority and the scale of the Labour meltdown. Were you surprised?
Yes, thank you so much for such a kind introduction. It's a really great pleasure and honour to be here at the forum, and grateful to those who put it on, and very nice to see so many good friends from the region. So thank you very much for the opportunity. The scale of the Conservative Party victory did surprise me, but then in hindsight you can work out why. I've always believed that no matter what politicians say an election is all about, the public decides sooner or later what they think it is about. And I think it became very clear it was about a determination to leave. We might have anticipated that, but it was also to ensure that Parliament worked effectively and produced a significant majority, because the uncertainty that had clouded the United Kingdom has affected many nations with which we have an engagement. And I think the mood of the public became very clear. It knew who it wanted, it knew who it didn't want, and it wanted to make sure that it didn't go to the polls for a long, long time. They had indeed had enough. And I think that was the reason, those combination of reasons was why we had the result we did.
Given the huge majority that they've got, you would think life would be very easy for the Conservatives, but are there some difficulties here for the new Prime Minister, given that he's backed by non-traditional Tory voters, and perhaps the huge majority still masks deep division in the country?
Well, it seems very true that you really truly can't win. If you win a small majority, then someone is going to say, oh, the Prime Minister is in difficulties because he has a small majority. If you have a large majority, apparently you still have problems, but they're different. I think the honest truth is this. In the United Kingdom, the reason results change between governments is because there are a block of seats known as marginals, which have always been marginals. The makeup of their demographic, for some reason or another, means that it is possible, by people changing their votes election to election, to decide that the country will move one way or another. These seats are immensely valuable, and I say that because I was born and brought up in one, and I represented one for 14 years. A seat in the north of England, a seat recaptured by the Conservatives at this election. And these seats will reject a hard right government, they will reject a hard left government. They're very pragmatic. They know instinctively, I think, who is right for government and who is wrong for government. Now, what the Prime Minister will need to do is recognise he has a significant group of MPs who represent these areas. He will have to listen to them, And I think their impact will be to moderate ideologues who exist in every party in every part of the world, and make sure that policies produced by the Conservative Party are practical, pragmatic, and deal with the sort of issues which got slightly buried in the election. There are issues about people who are finding life difficult, people who are worried about their jobs in the future, depending on what sort of Brexit there is, people worried about investment in public services. These MPs will carry that argument directly to Westminster, and I do think the Prime Minister will be listening to that argument.
You decided not to stand again, and that followed the last few months as an MP, which must have been very difficult for you. You, for the first time, became a rebel, and you had your party whip removed from you. Now, in the past, when people had rebelled against the government, including at one point the man who's now Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, they didn't have the whip removed. Are you angry about the way you were treated?
No. The irony of the situation is not lost on me. That a government that is largely in place because of serial rebellions which removed the previous Prime Minister decided to overcome those difficulties by exercising discipline on someone who previously supported that government. So you have to laugh, really. And I understood the reasons for doing it. The situation had got to be one where there was no certainty in the parliamentary party. Every day was a news story for the media. You can't govern that way. And it was very clear from decisively winning the leadership election of the Conservative Party that the Prime Minister was going to tackle that. It was just unfortunate to be in the middle of the road when he decided to do it. But I was very clear. Leaving the European Union without a deal, I thought, would put the country in a markedly worse position than it should be. And I wanted to make sure the government did everything it could to secure a deal, and therefore I co-sponsored a bill to that effect. I think it worked. I'm not sure the Prime Minister is particularly pleased, but it did work. We got a deal, then we tried to get it through Parliament, and I supported it at that stage, which is why the whip was eventually returned to me. And I now want to see the government be a success. The public have decided, both in the referendum and in the election, that it does want to leave the European Union. We must now make this work. So, although I was disappointed to be made an example of, it's a little bit like the centre forward, continuously fouled by the centre half on the field, and eventually turns round in a fit of anger and exacts retribution by laying out the centre forward, and I'm the one who gets sent off, not the person who's been fouling me for years. But that is politics. It was effective. It demonstrated the Prime Minister's toughness of character as Prime Minister, and who knows, that may have been an element in his success at the election as well.
We'll move on from the election and talk more about Brexit in a moment, but one last question on the election. You don't have to tell me. Did you vote Conservative?
I would always vote Conservative.
With regard to the slogan that was throughout the election that clearly chimed with many voters, "Get Brexit done," is that easier said than done? And do you think that the Prime Minister is now going to have problems with this dragging on, particularly in terms of trade relationships with countries all around the world, for literally years?
Firstly, on the slogan itself, it was the only slogan that cut through in the UK election. What the Prime Minister had done had been to corral the leave vote in one place. If you wanted to leave the European Union, there was only one party you could possibly vote for. And that one slogan was never countered by anything on the other side, because the opposition was too diffuse. And in binary situations, clarity really matters. And it was a very successful campaign. And it's only when you are tired of hearing a slogan repeated that you realise it's cut through. So it's a successful slogan. But of course, like all slogans, it masks reality to a degree. The public believe that Brexit will be achieved on January the 31st, when we formally leave the European Union, leave the institutions, stop paying, recover our borders, etc. And to an extent that is true. But again, as this audience will know, and people are beginning to realise at home, the process of leaving a voluntary arrangement of 40 years will take necessarily longer. And the success of leaving the EU can only be measured when a deal is achieved as to how to do that, and a new trading agreement, and that will take place next year. But the ramifications will last for a long time. But I think the government will be very clear that the physical leaving of the European Union on the 31st of January next year will demonstrate that the slogan has been fulfilled.
Let me ask you about the Prime Minister, because not only was he a colleague of yours, you for a time worked under him at the Foreign Office. Your other former colleague, the former Attorney General, Dominic Greaves, said, "I'm afraid my own assessment of his character is he's someone I simply cannot trust." What is your view of Boris Johnson, of his qualities and of his weaknesses?
Well, in a moment of refreshing audience just between ourselves, and I know it won't go any further, I didn't vote for Boris Johnson as leader. There was a leadership contest with him and Jeremy Hunt, another former Foreign Secretary, and I supported Jeremy. So I have no axe to grind to justify my decision or not or anything else. I did say to colleagues both in Europe and in the wider world, judge Boris Johnson when he gets the job. I think you need to put to one side what you think about the Boris Johnson of the past. He has always wanted to be the Prime Minister, and now he has achieved that. And as we all know, it's a bit of a blank page. He's not saddled himself with heavy ideology. He's been light-footed in terms of policy, but he's had a shrewd grasp, firstly, of where the Conservative Party was, because he won that comprehensively in the membership and amongst members of Parliament, and he's clearly had a shrewder grasp of the British public than some might have guessed. Now, accordingly, he will take that into his new role. Now, I just think, my view is that I think he started very well, an appeal to all the country, and I just think we've been through such a difficult time. I think many people in the country, regardless of their politics, will want to give him a breathing space and allow him to get on with it, not fight the battles of the past. It doesn't matter what colleagues may or may not have thought of Boris Johnson in the past. He's the Prime Minister. He's got a mandate from the people of substantial size, and I think we need to respect that. And now he will be judged on his actions going forward, and we should give him every support and advice, and let's see how he gets on.
One thing that's currently being suggested that the new government might do is merge the Department for International Development back into the Foreign Office, where it used to be years ago. As a minister who served for both departments, what do you think of that, and are there any worries for that target of 0.7% of GDP, which I know is in UK law currently, and the UK is only one of a handful of countries that meet that target? Do you think that target is under threat?
Well, again, 48 hours into a new government, I don't want to start a row. But my advice would be not to merge DFID and the FCO. DFID as a standalone department has given the United Kingdom an outstanding reputation. It runs very well. It's learnt over the years the rules of how to handle its aid budget. It's conscious of the risks presented in delivering such a large aid budget, but its thought leadership, the individuals who've come from that, including, of course, the current Under-Secretary for Humanitarian Affairs at the UN, Mark Lowcock, I think that's done well. If there is to be a merger, I think the government has got to set out very clearly why, what it intends to achieve, and what could be done better by merging the two. I think it's perfectly legitimate to have a look at that as a first stage of looking at the government, because the Prime Minister could well be there for some time. So it's right to look at the institutions, but I liked the independent standing of DFID. I don't want to see that affected. In relation to the 0.7% of GNI, I think the interesting thing is that both this election and the election of 2017, it's not been an issue. Never raised on a doorstep when I was there. I don't think it's under threat. I think it's supported by a significant majority of his own MPs and by the rest of Parliament. I would not like to see it affected. I think it gives the United Kingdom quite a reach abroad by having gone for this target, and something for us to encourage others to deliver. Qatar, of course, has also a superb development record and is looking to provide support in other parts of the world. We want to encourage others to do the same.
Let's do a very quick fire round on the Middle East and the various issues there. Syria, it looks like the war is coming to an end. Throughout the war, we were told there was no military solution, but there wasn't there? Assad and the Russians had it.
Yes. No one will win the Syrian war. You can't win a war with over 500,000 dead and millions displaced. It's a complete tragedy as to what has happened. it's been so long-lasting. There will be a degree of normalisation from some. I don't see the United Kingdom being involved in this for some time. Long-term, someone who has inflicted this on his own people cannot be considered a long-term answer to the issues. So although the military may have achieved or will achieve a Syria which is militarily quieter, the issues are not resolved of the Syrian people. That can only be resolved by a political process in which they are free, all of them, including those outside, to have their choices. I think the United Kingdom is a long way from any normalisation or assistance with reconstruction with Syria unless there are significant constitutional changes involving, crucially, the Syrian people, not those outside.
Yemen, did Western countries, including the UK, give the Saudi-led coalition too much freedom to prosecute their war, given what we know now? It's deadlocked and it's a humanitarian crisis.
It's not a situation, I think, of Western countries giving freedom to Saudi Arabia.
They could have condemned it more.
Saudi Arabia responded to not only the insurrection in Yemen, which removed a legitimate government, but a threat to its own borders, and a threat which was supported by some from outside. I think once the coalition decided to take action to seek an end, the United Kingdom was clear that, again, there is no military solution in Yemen, and I think events have proved that to be correct. And we've given every support on the diplomatic side, but an ally was being threatened and had also lost life because of attacks upon it, and the United Kingdom had to consider that as well in its reaction to the Yemen crisis.
Israel and Palestine, do you believe there is a Kushner plan? Does it even exist?
Whatever plan there was has been seriously affected by US decisions on Jerusalem, on refugees, on UNRWA, on the Golan Heights, and I'm proud that the United Kingdom did not follow that line. We've been very clear on our continuing support for a two-state solution. I have worried publicly that the United States has lost any semblance of being an honest broker in the situation. I would like to see a plan come forward simply so that others can then get involved. But there is no answer to this unless, again, the wishes and aspirations of Palestinian people are taken into account with the need for security and the existence of the State of Israel. And this can only be a political process. I worry that we're seeing hardly any movement on the process now. None of these problems resolve themselves. If it's not sorted, it won't be managed, it won't go away. Something even worse will happen in order to get people round a table in the future. So let's do something before that happens and keep doing all we can to resolve this issue, because it's just and right to do so.
As we come towards the end, I'd like to ask you about the state of multilateralism. The world has an important anniversary. The birth of an international organisation will be marked next year. You might think I'm talking about the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. In fact, in just a few weeks, it's the 75th birthday of the League of Nations. It existed at a time of American isolationism, nationalism, with extremism and hate speech spreading. Are we seeing echoes today?
One of the sad things about our role is that so often we're dealing with the same problems as we had before. And in this region, particularly, there are echoes of the past all around. I think in terms of countering that, firstly, I am a firm believer in multilateral institutions. The UN has done the job it was set up to do after the end of the Second World War. I fear that a generation that set up these international organisations did so because they had direct experience of the tragedies of the 20th century and the horrors, and a determination not to repeat them. My worry now is you have a generation who have no knowledge, well, no memory of that, and they're busy undoing these because somehow they believe that all the problems of the past can be reopened and their nation can come out first, and they're determined to protect their own interests. Multilateralism was designed to prevent nations getting into a situation where we could see the harm of the 20th century recreated. So I'm a firm believer, and I think Chancellor Merkel has done a great deal in recent speeches around the world to make this case. I think, secondly, I think we're also realising there are new challenges. We've just heard from the President of Armenia talking about the changes in technology. All of us will have heard speeches about migration, about environment and climate, and some of the pressures that will be new for us all to face. We know we already face the pressure of a strong demographic in this region, millions of young people looking for jobs, needing reforms in education, needing good governance in their states in order to communicate what they need to those who govern them. These are problems that are going to be faced, and will need a generation of politicians to be prepared to face up to them as well. So, although some of the problems are old, the determination I find from going around the region with really good diplomats and people prepared to work on them is to seek to overcome them. I think helping each other matters, why multilateralism matters to me, but we've constantly got to seek to find new ways to deal with the old problems and be aware there are new things coming along all the time which are going to challenge us.
My final question, you have spent so many years in international diplomacy. It's what many of the people in this room do. Can you give them perhaps any advice or possibly warn them of any potential pitfalls?
Always listen to the British. They're jolly good. We've got some really good people out there to offer advice. If you go to the MAJD dialogue in Rome, don't give your policemen 5 minutes to get from one place to the venue, because they love it. You will be driven faster through Rome than you've ever been driven before in your life, and will have the joy of going through crossroads with heavy vehicles coming at you and a policeman with a little baton trying to stop them as they speed you through. If you're being briefed by your officials, or if you are briefing a minister, please make sure they have the right brief for the right Gulf country. Otherwise, you may send your minister into a meeting with the wrong brief and rely on your minister's knowledge of headdress in order to discern who, in fact, he or she may be speaking to. So if you can watch out for all that, then I hope you and ministers will continue to enjoy the relationship that I've had with mine. My officials have been absolutely wonderful, and all I know of foreign affairs has been taught me by you and by them, and I've enjoyed every minute, and I hope I can continue.
Alistair Burt, thank you very much.
Thank you, James Bays. Thank you, Alistair Burt. Good to hear some refreshing views on the region. And our next interview now, it's a Newsmaker interview with a man who's in charge with one of the most anticipated projects for the region. In fact, he's the man in charge with one of the most valued, even sacred projects here in Qatar, the 2020 FIFA World Cup. Needless to say, he's still got his work cut out for him. Still a big undertaking, so I would say he's got both the best job and probably also the toughest job all in one. It's a pleasure to welcome to the stage Hassan Thawadi, the Secretary General of the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy, in other words, the man with all the World Cup tickets. And interviewing Mr. Thawadi, Becky Anderson from CNN. Welcome to you both.
We'll get to the tickets afterwards. You got them in your bag. It has been, Hassan, and thank you for doing this, a busy couple of days, weeks, months, years for you in your role as Secretary General of the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy. I'm going to get to the FIFA World Cup in a moment, your preparations for what is a massive, massive event. But I just want to start with a couple of more recent events, because these are really important to Qatar and to the run-up to the World Cup. First, the Arabian Gulf Cup, a couple of weeks ago. How significant was it that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain sent teams, albeit at the last moment?
I think the tournament itself holds a very special place in our hearts. I mean, to those of you who might not be aware of it, the Gulf Cup is a tournament between the countries within the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and included in it as well over the years has been Iraq and Yemen as well. It's a tournament that's very, very dear to our hearts as a population, as people of the Gulf. And up until maybe about a week or maybe 10 days before the tournament, it was set to be a tournament of 5 nations participating in it, and then it became a full house. And there's no doubts, as I said, because it holds a very close place to our heart, it was a great moment. But I think, again, it showcases, if you allow me, it showcases the commitment of the state of Qatar when it comes to separating sports and politics. The concept of creating platforms that, despite differences, bring people together. And that's exactly what the GCC showcased.
Nelson Mandela once said that sport had the power to change the world. We can see football diplomacy in action here. We also know that behind the scenes, when you won the rights to host the World Cup in 2022, it didn't go down really well with your neighbours. They felt that you weren't sharing the limelight, and I don't mean you personally, but Qatar as a whole. Do you ultimately believe that sport actually could help with this regional reconciliation?
I believe sports has a profound transformational power to bring people together, absolutely. And if somebody is as distinguished and as experienced as Nelson Mandela can appreciate that power, then rest assured I'm in the same camp, plain and simple. The reality is, again, as I said, from day one when we won the right to host the World Cup, we saw this as a transformational opportunity, not only for Qatar. It's a transformational opportunity for the region to utilize and to benefit out of this great event, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But it's also an opportunity to build bridges between people of different backgrounds, different parts of the world. It goes without saying, I think, stereotypes are very quick to build up and people become intransigent with their opinions. But you have this powerful tool, which is sports, and in particular football and the World Cup, that can truly break down these opinions. I'm not talking about from an ideological point of view. I'm talking about from the point of view of an average fan. The average fans that have come from Mexico, for example, because we're hosting the Club World Cup today, as we speak. The average fans that have come from Mexico today, and you can see them around the soup, their videos are all over the place, wearing the national dress, appreciating and experiencing the country for the first time, and building relations with the average Qatari or Egyptian or Indian who lives in Qatar. They create a bond amongst themselves. They support different teams, but there's a unity when it comes to the love and passion for this game. And it truly creates a bond that we all need to utilize and build upon.
Let's do 2022 then. You're talking about a competition which is now only 3 years out and counting. In fact, less than 3 years out. I mean, I can remember the day you won that bid. It feels like yesterday to me. I'm sure it doesn't feel like yesterday.
No, it surprisingly enough, it feels like yesterday, and yet it feels like centuries away. So it's
all right. Well, are you confident that you can deliver the stadiums and the infrastructure that you need for this competition, even if this dispute, blockade, call it what you will, is still in place? Because I know that has had an impact on your efforts.
Blockade. But no, absolutely. We're in progress. We're making progress right now. Our stadiums are coming online. We were supposed to inaugurate one of our stadiums, Qatar Foundation Stadium, at the final for the Club World Cup. Because we didn't get the certification at the right time and applied the test events that we wanted, we took the decision to delay the inauguration of the stadium, although it's construction-wise, it is absolutely complete. And that is within the pipeline that we have. Qatar Foundation was meant to be done by the end of this year, and it is complete by the end of this year. Next year, 3 stadiums are coming into the pipeline, and by 2021, all stadiums will be ready. The metro system, which covers Doha and Wakra and parts of the northern part of the country, is complete. It's now becoming operational as we speak. We tested it very, very successfully in the Gulf Cup, where about 17,000 people used one of the lines to come to a football match. So we not only is it complete, but we're actually testing its veracity and its efficiency, and it's proving to be a success. So the expressways that we're talking about are all coming into play as well. In terms of preparation, construction-wise, infrastructure-wise, everything is coming according to plan. And now we're moving on to the operational side. So the Gulf Cup that you've mentioned, the Club World Cup, which we're hosting as we speak, we're hosting the next edition next year as well. We will have another tournament in 2021. All are in place to test our plans, our strategies that we've put in place, and to help us improve and be ready for 2022. But also I'd like to add just one last element. For example, the Club World Cup as well as the Gulf Cup are an opportunity for us also to hear the fans. to listen to the fans, to the supporters that have followed their teams and flown over to Qatar, to see, the plans that we've put in place. Do they actually meet the expectations? Are they satisfactory for the fans themselves or not? Because we view these fans as our partners in preparing to host a very successful, and I'd like to think a very transformational tournament in 2022, both in terms of event, but also beyond.
Yeah, and it's transformational off the pitch as well. And I want to talk about the changes that the World Cup has affected, or at least the promises for changes that the World Cup has affected. This country has been constantly under the spotlight ever since you won the right to host this competition. The Cabinet has now announced changes to worker welfare, and these are in response, on the whole, to the criticisms that have been weighed on this country. So I want to ask you a couple of questions here, which I just want very specific answers to. When will the kafala system end? And beyond that, when will we see the introduction of minimum wage and mechanisms in place to ensure that employers and sponsors do not abuse their workers?
The specific answers to these, because as you know, the announcement was made by the Minister of Labour that the kafala system is ending. The minimum wage, now just to address the minimum wage announcement that was made, there is a minimum wage in place right now, albeit we can argue whether it's sufficient or not, but there is a minimum wage in place. It's, I believe, 750 riyals a month. There is now a commitment towards reviewing that minimum wage and increasing it, but in addition for it to be applied, and it is being applied in a non-discriminatory way. And I just want to clarify, because a lot of people might not be aware of this, most minimum wages that are currently in place within the region, not just within Qatar, are as a result of sending nations negotiating on behalf of their citizens. So the wages vary between nationalities. What the state of Qatar has done is impose a non-discriminatory minimum wage in relation to all workers in the state of Qatar. Now this, of course, as I said, it's currently in place. There is now a review to increasing it. When that will be, I can't answer that specifically, as well as when the kafala will end. What I can say is, just to address just one slight point, the commitment towards worker welfare reforms has been in existence before we won the right to host the World Cup. The National Vision 2030, when it was launched around 2008, under one of its pillars did have, as one of the aims, is the improvement of the dignity of anybody that is working in the state of Qatar. Now, it's fair to say as well that while laws were put in place, the implementation of these laws were not up to expected standards, and not even to us. The World Cup, as we said, was always going to be a catalyst for positive change, as a transformational tool. And it served on many different fronts. At the forefront of it was the worker welfare reforms. So since we won the right to host the World Cup, within the Supreme Committee, we started our initiatives before the focus was brought on upon us by the Guardian story. And since then, initiatives have been taken, laws have been changed, but more important than all of this, on the ground, change is happening as we speak. And I can speak, in a bit as well about the work that the Supreme Committee has done, that is also in partnership with the Ministry of Labour now being implemented beyond the Supreme Committee's environment towards the wider remit of the country.
No, this is all really important stuff. It's of course one thing to announce these initiatives, another to enforce these laws. It is enough, very briefly, being done on the enforcement side.
You can never claim that anything is enough. Look, when it comes to worker welfare reforms, I don't think any nation can look at itself today and say that they've done enough, maybe with the exception of certain nations within Scandinavia. I will say that. I do not think any nation today can come out and make the claim that they have been able to, that they can do that they've done enough, that everybody is covered under a safety net, that everybody is taken care of. But all we can do is strive continuously and constantly to improve. And that is what we're doing over the last 10 years. And I'll give you an example of, in relation to the work that we're doing within the Supreme Committee. We launched our standards that governs the construction work, as well as the services being provided to us within the Supreme Committee early on, in about 2012, 2013, before even any major construction work started. We engaged with the companies here to make sure that they are our partners in delivering these reforms and delivering and enforcing these standards. We engaged with NGOs and trade unions as well to come and help us and to observe what we're doing and to help us in achieving sustainable change. Not change that addresses criticism for the purpose of just satisfying the critics, but change that goes to the individual that will benefit out of this change in a way that will enhance his life, that will improve, that will offer him dignity, that will offer him safety and security within his lifestyle and within his life. And that is what we tried to do, and that is what we attempted to do. And we evolved. I just want to add that one last point. We evolved over the last 10 years. We've improved. We've learned, we've learned that, and we learn every day that there are things that, still need more improvement. They need more development, and that's what the state is doing here as well. We're implementing change, and we're observing, and we're working towards improving it. And that's why we look towards, the International Labour Organization, ITUC, BWI as partners in helping us in improving.
The 2018-2019 Annual Workers' Welfare Progress Report, which you will be well aware of, suggested that there are a total of 11 deaths of workers working on Supreme Committee projects. Of these, 10 were described as non-work related, and 1 was work-related. There have been reports, Your Excellency, of family members of workers who have died on projects not being compensated. What more are you doing for the families behind the scenes, as it were?
Let me start off by saying every death is a tragedy. Plain and simple. Whether you define it as non-work related or work related or whatever else it may be, it is an absolute tragedy, especially to the family members. In relation to non-work related deaths, when we're informed of a death, what we do is we send a team out to investigate, to speak to the workers' colleagues or the deceased colleagues, and try to understand the circumstances and so on. And of course, we communicate with the family as well. And we ensure and work very hard towards ensuring the families get compensated. And companies, at the most, do so willingly, and some companies, if they're reluctant, we actually enforce them towards paying compensation. Now, in relation to some of these incidents that you've mentioned, where some families might not have received compensation, it is because, as I said, no system, unfortunately, is perfect. And the reality is, the unfortunate reality is, some companies and some incidents do fall through the cracks. But that's where we, as soon as we find out about it, we jump in straight away and try to ensure that families are compensated. We do try to investigate as soon as possible any incident that occurs, whether it's work-related or non-work-related.
Okay.
And just to clarify just one last point, every one of these deaths is a serious matter and a tragedy to us, and we take this matter very seriously. And as I said, even though sometimes, unfortunately, incidents do fall through the cracks, it's still unacceptable, whether to us or anybody else. And we are taking this matter very, very seriously, and not just within myself, but within the entire Supreme Committee.
Good. I know that labour rights and worker conditions were a real concern for Liverpool FC. They are, as I understand it, arriving as we speak, pretty much, for this Club World Cup competition. One of their biggest fan groups, I think it's called Spirit of Shankly, was actually not too keen on its fans travelling here. I know that you spent a lot of time trying to address their concerns and ensure that their fans felt comfortable about coming out here. I'd just like you to share with the audience what it is that you did in order to get them to change from pretty much not interested in, and there was some talk of a boycott of this competition, to they're pretty neutral on it and it was up to the fans to come. How did you change their minds?
Well, again, as I said, this is an opportunity, and we look at it as a platform to bring people together, to raising concerns, and breaking down stereotypes. So what we did was we engaged with Liverpool FC themselves, and we engaged with Spirit of Shankly. We went over, members of my team went over, they opened themselves up effectively to any sort of questions, any sort of queries that were, to dispelling any misconceptions and misinformation that the Spirit of Shankly had, and at the same time also to confirm maybe some of the information that they do have, and showing how we are tackling these issues. So we, the best way and the only way of doing it is to look at this as an event, truly as a platform to bring people together, many more ways than one, and in doing so, being very open and transparent in terms of the genuine progress that's being made over here. And as I said, it's being made out of a desire and a commitment to values that we share as a nation, and ultimately we share as human beings. And I think without anything left, with everything on the table, any question, no holds barred. I think the spirit of Shankly recognized the fact that we were genuine, and the fact that it is worth giving this nation, to coming in and experiencing and following Liverpool FC. And I think, it was well received.
And they have actually got hundreds, if not thousands, of travelling fans for this competition.
The number that I've heard is 5,000. And I think, when the Liverpool fans come over, when the Monterrey fans, they're already here, the Flamengo fans come in, I think it'll be a celebration of multilateralism and multiculturalism in a nation that truly believes in that and truly embraces inclusivity.
So there were critics who said, oh, Qatar is a conservative country, it's not going to be up for people from different backgrounds and orientations. I know that you've said in the past that everybody is welcome. And I guess, if you're thinking about those travelling Liverpool fans, are you ready to host them? For example, can they have a pint and watch their team? How much is that pint going to cost? You know the answers to these questions.
Look, as I said, alcohol is not part of our culture, but hospitality is part of our culture. So what we do, there will be places, and there are places that serve alcohol that people can go and enjoy a pint. The actual price of it, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't know. I'm not aware of it, so if anybody...
£5 as I understand it, but anyway.
Well, if anybody knows and, they're not happy with it, get back to us, we'll see what we can do. But it's not, I can't make any promises. As a matter of fact, you should have asked that question when Akbar al-Bakr was here. Pass that question on to him. Alcohol will be available. But again, it's the purpose is to make people welcome, to make people, come here in a mood of celebration. Come here understanding and recognizing that we do share different backgrounds. We do share different beliefs. We do share different opinions. But sharing a difference and having different opinions does not mean that we cannot come together, celebrate in a truly unified way, our common humanity. And look, we're in the Doha Forum today. I think if there's ever an opportunity or ever an example of, multilateralism, multiculturalism, differences in opinion, then I think the Doha Forum this year has actually showcased it.
It certainly provided a platform for all the right questions, and you have taken on many of those questions and criticisms that have been levelled, and you've provided us some very sort of robust answers. My colleague Amanda Davis spoke to Nasser Al-Khatta, who is the CEO of 2022 recently. He told Amanda that he thought coverage of Qatar he felt that the coverage of Qatar has been unfair, the level of criticism levelled at the country unfair. Do you agree with that assessment?
The level of criticism that was thrown at us, I think, since 2010, in certain areas was biased, in other areas was misinformed, and in some areas was plain and simply false. But there was some criticism that was constructive, that was genuine. I think, again, we were in a very unique situation, right? Over 10 years, we faced, again, no nation has ever hosted a tournament or been nominated to host a tournament with such a prolonged period of time. So every time there's a quiet news story, let's go and attack Qatar. And host nations are usually subject to extreme criticism. We've seen it in Russia, we've seen it in Brazil, we've seen it in South Africa. But I think there's a specific viciousness in certain areas when it came to us in certain elements. Now, for those of you who might not be aware, if you look back in the history, and certain people have come out and actually said it, there was a targeted campaign against us that spread misinformation, spread falsehoods. That did happen. There were other campaigns that provided constructive and merited criticism, and these are the ones that we embraced and engaged with. But I think in the overall, regardless whether we were treated fairly or not, I think us as a nation, and if the blockade told us anything, that we're a resilient nation. And the fact is, we believe that the benefits of this tournament far outweigh any let's say, unrequited criticism or anything else, or any pains that we might have gone through or go through, because I think the benefits truly will come towards the people of the region, towards the people of Qatar. And what we're hoping to do also, and hoping that this tournament can achieve, is a platform that truly serves as one of the beacons in a very divisive world where it can bring people together.
And we've run out of time. Well, we haven't had enough time to talk about legacy, which I know is incredibly important to you. And you and I have talked about it a lot in the past, and there are some great legacy opportunities and strategy here. I want to take just a final moment.
Sure.
And have you imagined the moment when that opening game of 2022 FIFA World Cup is drawing to a finish? Your job of delivery will then effectively be over. You will probably be able to relax for the first time in years. What do you hope will be running through your mind at that point?
I hope that my daughters will still recognize me. Honestly.
And with that, Your Excellency, we thank you very much indeed for joining us. Fantastic. Thank you.
Hassan Thawadi, thank you very much, Mr. Thawadi, obviously for talking about what is certain to be a historic opportunity for the state of Qatar, but also for addressing some of these serious challenges, those sticking points and remaining concerns surrounding the World Cup. I'm sure Becky and I don't know if you're doing this now, Becky. Is it about tickets or? Yeah, Becky and I will remind you of ourselves. Closer to 2022, though. Now, our next speaker is the Secretary General of an international organization that comprises 33 countries, in fact, all Asian countries, in addition to the Russian Federation. So, 34 countries, in fact, if my calculus is correct. The organization is called the Asia Cooperation Dialogue. It was established in 2002 to promote intra-Asian cooperation, dialogue, and closer ties. So what is the state of affairs currently among all these Asian countries? Well, let's find out by introducing and welcoming onto the stage the Secretary General of this organization, Pornchai Danvivatana. Please welcome.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Asia Cooperation Dialogue, ACD Secretariat, I am honored to be invited to address the plenary session of the Doha Forum today. I would like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Qatar for honoring me with the invitation to participate in the 19th Doha Forum. As I was approached to speak about coordination and cooperation among Asian countries, which I believe could contribute to our discussion on the theme of Doha Forum 2019, in a sense that regional cooperation could contribute definitely to multilateral cooperation and vice versa. At the outset, I would like to submit that we presently need one another more than before, because many countries, if not all, could not be able to meet or overcome global challenges that may disrupt our ways of life and global geopolitical architecture. I concur with the goal of this forum that we need a collective thought of a global governance for the present and future generations. This idea corresponds with the objective of our grouping. In the year 2002, a continent-wide forum, or the Asia Cooperation Dialogue, ACD, was established. The aim of which is to address the missing links in Asia by incorporating Asian countries towards an Asian community without duplicating other organizations or groupings. It is the only framework that includes the Middle East, South, North, East, and West Asia in one group. It is a platform for cooperation where high-level policymakers informally exchange views to solve Asian issues by Asian countries. Cooperation through discussions or dialogue has enhanced the comfort level of all member states of the ACD so far. The growing number of the membership from 18 in 2002 to 35 in 2019, illustrates that a multilateral grouping like ACD is a platform for constructive discussions on international issues of concern. It could supplement and complement other groups in a wider context. To simply put, even though the ACD is not an international organization, being a loosely structured group of 35 Asian countries, it could serve as a non-state actor that may come up with new sets of standards or good governance to address our collective needs and priorities. The strong point of this grouping lies with the notion of unilateralism and informality. To illustrate further, there are 6 pillars of cooperation underpinning work of the ACD, namely interrelation of food, water, and energy security, connectivity, science, technology, and innovation, education and human resource development, culture and tourism, and lastly, promoting approaches to inclusive and sustainable development. Under each pillar, member states may initiate any project-based activities that they think would contribute to their domestic needs as well as national policies beneficial to other ACD member states as well. During the past 17 years, it has proved that these 2 dimensions, namely dialogue and project-based activities, drive cooperation forward without being politicized. If I take Pillar 5, culture and tourism, as an example, we know that Asia is a cradle of civilization. Cultural diversity becomes part of our identities in Asian countries in general. Cultural diversity is acknowledged and embraced by all ACD countries. As a result, a pillar of cooperation in culture and tourism is dedicated. In a sense, one could consider that each would support each other well, as is the case of gastronomy tourism. Cuisine or food includes its way of preparation with herbs. It denotes that tourism will become more than entertainment and relaxation if flavors of culture are added. All in all, culture helps promote the value of humanity amidst the disruption by artificial intelligence or AI, as well as the Internet of Things. Excellencies, other than what I have described a minute ago, I have to admit that culture would be considered as soft power of Asia. We could make the best use of our cultural diversity to harness people of different regions to understand one another better. Better understanding among peoples is somewhat an instrument to promote confidence building as well as people empowerment and people connectivity. This could, by and large, result in standard setting or good governance system that is moral, cooperative, and practical for Asia and the rest of the world, thus ensuring human security as part of a governance system in a multipolar world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Secretary General Pornchai Danvi Vatana. Thank you. Now, our next topic is, alas, sadly, a very painful one. In view of the ongoing situation on the ground, the occupation, the impunity, the neglect, if I can put it so bluntly, that not even an anticipated so-called deal of the century could give us pause for an educated sense of optimism. The topic is the future of Palestine, and I do hope that our speakers will be able to give us a more optimistic outlook than I and many of you could afford to do. I'm delighted to welcome here onto the stage Hanan Ashrawi, who is, of course, a member of the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization. And joining her on stage, Saeb Arakat, the Secretary General of the Executive Committee of the PLO. Moderating this session will be Al Jazeera's Mehdi Hassan. Hey.
Everyone got a microphone? Hello, good afternoon. Everyone awake?
Hello.
Yes? Good. Introductions are all done, so we can kick off with solving this problem in the next 20 minutes. I have to say, Saeb Erekat insisted he only be interviewed by a spokesperson for the Palestinian Authority, but they couldn't find one, so I'm here instead. That's a joke. Let's kick off. Let's get straight into it. The topic is the future of Palestine. Before we get to the future, let's talk about the present. I think you'd both agree that for decades the situation in Palestine has been dire, but given you both have been involved in this conflict, in these negotiations for decades, how bad is it right now in relative terms, given the Trump administration effectively declaring war on the Palestinians, backing every Israeli illegal move, given the craziness of Israeli politics, a third election in the space of a year? How bad is it now, comparatively speaking, Hanan? You want to grab the mic?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. We will try to wake everybody up. I know there's a lot of food here, but let's try to work on some food for thought as well. Very provocative. I think we're witnessing the completion of the fundamentalist Zionist agenda that began its implementation in 1948. And I think it is that bad, in the sense that there is an attempt to finalize the Palestinian question by delivering Palestine to Israel. Before, we used to say that Israel has its own agenda, it is imposing its will, it is acting with full impunity, it is trying to superimpose Greater Israel over all of historical Palestine. And we used to say that the US is a biased peace broker and has always given Israel cover and so on, but it was in a sense contained within certain basic assumptions based on international law. Now you have the most extreme hardline Israeli government coalition. You have in the US not only the sponsor and not only the ally of Israel, but you have in them a partner in the occupation. We call it a partner in crime, in the sense that the US is involved directly in taking illegal unilateral steps to totally destroy the imperatives of peace and the building blocks of.
So is it worse now than it has been before in your career doing that?
I think so. I think it is at one point where we are facing existential issues. Okay. And these issues are not just local, they're not just internal, they are global, because we are part of a rules-based system that is being challenged.
Okay. Is it worse now than before, Sam?
No. I believe that's what's worse is that the international system is changing. We have President Trump, who constitutes a change in international relations. 6,000 years of recorded history of man and woman is now being translated that nations either are born to be strong or to find strong nations to protect them with the right price. That's the Trump's doctrine. And he decided to begin with us as Palestinians by undermining all the terms of reference, international law, Jerusalem is Israel's capital, closing offices, consulates, trying to legitimize settlements, and so on. But this is to no avail, for a simple reason. We're 194 nations worldwide. Not a single nation of you is without problems with its social fabric, demographic, or borders. So the Spanish don't wake up one morning to find Barcelona the capital of Catalonia if the price is right to Trump. Neither would Peru or Ecuador. Show me a nation without problems. So if this administration is going to throw us in the bath of the law of the jungle, God help us. So as Palestinians, we managed to stand firm and tall with international law, recognition of Israel, two-state solution, going the path to achieve peace, and peace is doable, and peace is possible, and we will make it. Because as a Palestinian, I'm not going to get into the discussion What's my situation, bad or worse? I was 12 years old when the occupation came to my hometown, Jericho. I'm 64 now, 8 grandchildren. I want to make sure that I have my own state.
So
what is it that will enable me to build my own state and continue this process?
So let me ask you about that. You mentioned two-state solution. The Trump administration, Hanan mentioned, there were some basic assumptions that previous administrations, for all their biases, stuck to. This is an administration that says has no interest in the two-state solution, doesn't use the phrase two-state solution. Jared Kushner says there's no need to talk about two-state solution. The Israeli government, not interested in a two-state solution, doesn't use the phrase anymore. You said 10 years ago, in 2009, you told a bunch of reporters, you said that the time may be right, you said, for President Abbas to, quote, tell his people the truth, that with the continuation of settlement activities, the two-state solution is no longer an option. And yet 10 years later, you're still clinging to a two-state solution. Why are you continuing to perpetuate this fiction of a two-state solution?
Mahdi, I think my line was, with the settlement activities continuing, it's undermining the two-state solution. But the only
you said the two-state solution is no longer an option. It may be time to say it's no longer. That was 10 years ago.
If they continue with settlement activities,
they did continue.
Mahdi, no longer an option to those who make settlements and those who make dictations. But for me, the only option is to live and let live. The only option is international law, the rule of law, solving problems by peaceful means. Look, you have a Trump administration. Once there is a president of the United States called Theodore Roosevelt that said the White House is an office of international morality. And that's right. This White House needs giant statesmen and not real estate agents. And once you're shameless, you can do whatever you want.
For you, it's still two states or bust.
It is two-state solution. And the question to me today is not whether it's two-state or one state. The question to me, how do I continue institution building? How do I continue legitimization? How do I continue staying in my land? And yes, the answer will be two-state solution. I have never been closer to a Palestinian state more than I am now.
Okay. Well, let me ask Hanan a similar question, not just about two-state solution, but Trump came into office promising he'd deliver the deal of the century. He recently said, and I quote, if Jared Kushner can't do it, it can't be done. Do you have any faith whatsoever in Jared Kushner bringing about a two-state solution or a solution of any shape or form?
Let me put it frankly. I don't think that's the first and only delusional statement that we heard from Trump. Let alone nepotism, of course, in the White House. His son-in-law, of course, who has his own commitments, his own ideological commitments. That's what they brought to bear on the so-called peace process. There is no theoretical plan. There's an ideological commitment. There is an unholy alliance between the extremist right-wing Christian Zionists, the evangelicals, between the extremist fundamentalist Jewish Zionists, between Netanyahu, between Trump's funders, including Sheldon Adelson and so on, the pro-Israel lobby. This is the combination that is taking decisions on behalf of the US administration. So the question is that what we're seeing now is an actual implementation. I talked about unilateral illegal measures. So I've talked about the annexation of Jerusalem, the recognition of the annexation of Jerusalem, the borders, the refugees. They dropped the term occupation from their lexicon. They dropped self-determination.
So based on all of that, do you still stick to a two-state solution as well? Do you still think that's possible?
I think we have to, look, the Palestine National Council and Central Council took decisions that the interim phase is over, took decisions that we are now free of our obligations as per the signed agreements, because everything has been violated and Israel reneged on all its obligations, and it is acting along with its partner, the US, to destroy the two-state solution. So there are certain requirements. Let me go to the evolution of the two-state solution. When in 68, 69, we talked about the one-state solution, you all know about the democratic, non-sectarian, secular state in Palestine where Jew, Christian, Muslim, atheist, anybody can live in peace. This was shut down immediately. Then when we accepted, in 1988, the National Council accepted the two-state solution, the principle of partition, they said, no, based on 181, they said, no, that's not enough. That's a major concession. We accepted it. Then they said, no, 242, 338, not 181, because Israel had already annexed 22%. Yeah. So now Israel created more facts, and they said, no, you have to accept 242, 338. Now that Israel has created more facts on the ground...
So my question is, at what stage do you go back to the one state, democratic state, non-sectarian? Because 1 in 3 Palestinians say they support that. Among young Palestinians, a growing number support that. In the diaspora, I hardly meet any Palestinian in the diaspora anymore who support
I agree with you. There are many people who think that the two-state solution is a thing of the past, and that reality has superseded the two-state solution. I think we should seriously discuss, negotiate, look into all the options, including not just the one state, including the issue of how the shape and the nature of the Palestinian system within all of historical Palestine. If we're going to say that the idea of partition is off, not because we chose to cancel it, but because Israel and the US have effectively canceled it.
Yeah.
So what are our options? Now, we're not going to say that we can influence the whole world. No. There is a universal consensus about two states, but Palestinians are beginning to rethink that, since they know that this has cost us tremendously. This has allowed for expansion of settlements, more land theft, more theft of resources, more home demolitions, more lives. Thousands of Palestinians have been killed because of two things: because of lack of accountability for Israel and full impunity for Israel on the one hand, lack of protection for the Palestinians, and total disregard for Palestinian rights and lives. These are the issues that we must address. Without them, there is no solution whatsoever.
So, Saib, Hanan says, maybe it's time for a rethink. We need to put all options on the table. You're saying to me you've never been closer to two states, which some people will agree with, many people would disagree with. Would you, if you look at the Palestinian people and you look at the polling, you look at the debates going on, and you say, actually, you know what, this is where we are. The Americans and the Israelis have cancelled what I've worked my lifetime for, and actually the only realistic option now is to say, this is apartheid, we demand equal rights, one person, one vote. Is that something that's completely anathema to you, or is that something you would consider?
Look, government and leadership is not about what I should tell people. First of all, you have an American administration that's working on the deal of the last century, not the deal of the century. They're trying to take us back to Balfour Declaration that specified the creation of a Jewish homeland, and without prejudicing the civil and religious rights of Palestinians. So it is the deal of the last century, or maybe it could be the deal of the next century, as far as Kushner's genius is concerned. Now, this administration, all American administrations were pro-Israel. This administration moved us to being pro-occupation, pro-settlements, and so on. So if Saeb Erekat stands and tells Mahdi, rape is legal, stealing is legal, that's equivalent when somebody stands up and says settlements are legal, against the Hague Convention, Geneva Conventions, all international law. So the point here, what serves me as a Palestinian? How do I get to my rights? How do I get to my freedom?
Which is what I'm asking.
How do I get to my
If the two-state way doesn't work, is there an alternative?
I will get there through sustaining myself on the ground, through continuing building my institutions, strategy that will sustain my legitimacy. And look, when I say
Saib, there's a famous statement, there's a famous quote attributed to Einstein.
I'm going to stop you.
There's a famous quote attributed to Einstein that madness is doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. Isn't that what you're doing?
I'm not mad. I'm not experiencing the same thing. They are the mad ones.
Okay.
Since 1967, Israel has been trying military solutions, home demolitions, extrajudicial killing, settlements, and so on. What did this give them? Now, my point here, 6th of December 2019, we watched history in the making. The American Congress, not the Europeans, not the Africans, not the Russians, not the Chinese, not the Arab League. The American Congress voted 226 votes against 188 for two states, Palestinians' rights of determination, no settlements, and no annexation. This is significant. This is significant. This is a wake-up call to Trump. And when I say that we have never been so close, last 2 days ago, we had a resolution from the General Assembly to renew the mandate of UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Work Agency. We got 170 votes. Israel, the US, and the Pacific Islands. All our resolutions that we passed, 160 votes. All people now, the responsibility of the international community is to ask themselves the question. You want to take the cost-free road? You're going to count in this administration the one I abandoned international law? And seek what you like to satisfy people? My solution is to live and let live. I have recognized the state of Israel right to exist and live in peace and security, 6-7 lines, and the only solution for me is the establishment of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital on the 1967 lines, and solving all core issues in accordance with international law.
So in accordance with international law, Saeb points to the UN resolutions and the congressional votes go in your favor. Of course, these votes, they don't always affect facts on the ground. So a lot of people, especially in the diaspora, as you know, in the US where I'm based right now, a lot of talk of BDS. The only way is to put teeth behind these threats and these resolutions, exact a cost for the occupation, boycott, divestment, sanctions. Some other people say that's anti-Semitic. You're targeting the world's only Jewish state. What is your position on BDS, Hannah?
Well, first of all, before we get to BDS, we have hundreds of UN resolutions, and they are all gathering dust in the archives of the UN. I just had a meeting with Ban Ki-moon, who also shares our frustration in the sense that when it comes to Palestine, all resolutions are to be read, declared, announced. Not a single one was implemented or honored. So that's enough. When Congress takes decisions that are totally adverse to Palestinian rights and totally, fully supportive of Israel, they are applicable. But when they take resolutions about the two-state solution, this is non-binding.
Okay.
But what is binding is that there is an ironclad commitment to funding for Israel. That's the problem with this resolution. So to go back to BDS, I think the issue of accountability is crucial. From the beginning, Israel was exempt from any kind of accountability, any kind of sanctions, any kind of real examination of its lawlessness and criminality. If they continue like that, and if governments are governed by their own self-interest and suffer from a lack of a very strong backbone, then I think the people have the right to take matters, to act on issues of principle. I think the people should be given the right to be ethical consumers, to be responsible investors, and to respect international law where governments are not doing it. So if you deprive not just the Palestinians, but individuals and organizations and firms and companies from acting on the basis of principle and law, then what you're doing is telling the Palestinians you have no right to address international organizations, to appeal to international law.
So you
have no right to armed struggle. You have no right to collective resistance. And the whole world has no right, individually and collectively, to hold Israel accountable.
So you're a supporter, it's fair to say.
Sanctions. I'm explaining the context because
I'm glad
things
she's
out
with
of
me.
context are really misleading. So I believe this kind of accountability for Israel is perfectly legitimate. It worked for South Africa. And it is one of the many tools of nonviolent resistance that can be effective and can empower people to act where the governments are too cowardly to act. This is one.
So, I just want to, I'm sorry, running out of time. Saib, the PLO, you're the Secretary General of the PLO. You used to work for the PA and President Abbas. What is the position of the PLO and the Palestinian Authority on boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning Israel?
We are with any move that will...
Raise the microphone.
First of all, we are totally with the BDS as far as all settlement activities are concerned, all settlement products. This is immoral, this is sweat and blood of Palestinians, and we're not against any peaceful move to stop this occupation.
But you support it only against settlements, just to be clear.
Settlements, and we support any other action that may bring about a two-state solution, because the real threat in Israel is the Israel occupation of Palestinians.
Okay.
That's the truth. Settlements is a threat.
Yes.
Is a real threat. Occupation is a threat.
But you would boycott settlement goods, but not goods from Israel.
You asked me about the PLO position. The PLO position is to boycott all settlement products and urge all nations to boycott all settlement. But at the same time, the PLO is not against any peaceful means that may achieve the end of occupation and holding Israel accountable.
What were you saying, Hanan?
I was saying that the PNC, Saib, no, the PNC and the PCC adopted BDS. They didn't say only settlement products. This is a Central Council.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
We support BDS fully, and there's a committee that supports BDS.
We are with any move and any steps that may hold Israel accountable. Now, anti-Semitism is evil, Mahdi. Anti-occupation is noble. And those who are trying to mix between the two aspects are evil. And this must be the point that we make here.
Yep.
If we want to stand tall for international law, we have to realize, when I say that we're closer to a Palestinian state more than any time before, today, in 15th of December 2019, I, the Christian and Muslim Palestinian, am 50.9% of the population between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean. Netanyahu and Friedman are 49.1% of the population. What are they going to do with me? They want to impose a solution, dictate a solution, whatever it is. It's not going to work. It's not doable. Occupation only corrupts. And if Trump wants to defeat terrorism in this region, we're with him. Just finish a sentence, please. I think he did not develop the techniques to kill ideas with bullets. And he did not develop the techniques to prevent ideas to travel with or without visas. To defeat terrorism and extremism in this region, two things are needed. And I want the Arabs to hear me, because the real threat on us as Arabs are Arabs. Democracy in the Arab world is a must. And anyone who says Arabs are not ready for democracy is a racist, period. Secondly, what we need is to see the drying up of the Israeli occupation. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to redouble from the start. The solution will be two states, the state of Palestine with East Jerusalem's capital, to live side by side, the state of Israel and peace and security.
We're running out of time. I need to get a quick answer from you. You mentioned the conditions, the populations, very quickly. Do you believe you're living under apartheid right now?
Absolutely. I am living under apartheid, full apartheid, deeper apartheid, worse apartheid than the ones that existed in South Africa, because there are roads in the West Bank and East Jerusalem today I cannot use as a Palestinian, only Israelis can use. Such diseases as bigotry and racism, once they inflict underneath our skins, we had as a human tendency to justify it, sometimes sociological, psychological, economic, sexual, and now Israel is using the term security reasons. Yes, it is apartheid.
We're almost out of time. I must ask this question to both of you. With the greatest respect, the vast majority of Palestinians are young people. They're under the age of 29. Does the Palestinian leadership reflect them? No. Does it represent them? Saeb, I believe you're 64. Hanan, you're 73. Mahmoud Abbas is 84 and almost 11 years into a term that finished 11 years ago. Is there a leadership crisis in the Palestinian movement right now?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, longevity in itself is not a virtue. It depends on what you do with it. And it depends on whether you take over a monopoly. If you take a monopoly of decision-making and leadership positions, then certainly you are excluding the younger generation. And I've been calling for the empowerment of the young and women. And I've been trying actually to get out of the scene to make room for the young. But I think this can happen and should happen through elections. Can I say something?
Time is very short, yes.
Because I want to talk
very
about
briefly, because they're going to throw us off the
criminalizing BDS.
Yeah.
And at the same time, conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, which is what Trump did with his latest executive order, is one way of giving Israel a free pass. And this is a cheap trick, trying to link Palestinian struggle, the Palestinian struggle which has its own integrity, to all sorts of racism, while it's Israel and the US that exercise racist attitudes.
Is it time for a new generation of Palestinian leaders? Mahmoud Abbas's term, I believe next month, will be 11 years since his term was over.
Look, Mahmoud Abbas is elected. Mahmoud Abbas.
Yeah, 11 years ago his term finished.
You're right. Yeah. You don't mention that we had a coup d'etat by Hamas in 2007 and prevented elections. I'm not excusing ourselves, but all I'm telling you that we're not free of mistakes. No. But at least Palestinians don't have to see with the eyes of Mahmoud Abbas, listen through his ears, and speak through his tongues. We have 16 political parties. Everyone is free to do whatever they want. We're developing whatever we can. I'm not saying we.
Are there enough young leaders, do you think?
Well, I think if you say I'm 60, Hanan is 70, we are 6% of the population. We have 94% of the population who are less than 60 years old. And I really believe that this is the future generation. They are our daughters and sons, very qualified. And yes, this will be the new leadership that's required for Palestinians. But the question is, what kind of system and institutions we have? We don't have, every country in the Arab world have institutions, human rights, so on and so on. We don't want names for institutions. We want institutions of states.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to do as Palestinians.
You can in 1 second. We're out of time. We're officially over. But I'm going to sneak in one last question. I'm going to sneak in a last question if you both give very short answers before we get in trouble. Benjamin Netanyahu, is it over for Netanyahu? Yes or no? And if what comes after Netanyahu, will it be better or worse for Palestinians? Hannah.
Yes, it's over for Netanyahu. I think he outlived his political usefulness to Israel and to the different political parties.
Coming after him, better or worse?
Not much better. And I think it's probably more of the same, because the discourse of extremism and racism and annexation and ideology is the prevailing discourse.
Very briefly.
I agree with Hanan. Netanyahu is over, but I don't poke my nose in Israel's affairs. Israelis have the right to choose their leadership. Any Israeli future government that wants to make peace with me must understand that my peace needs end occupation, State of Palestine 6-7, is Jerusalem its capital, solving all core issues, including refugees and accordance with international law, and we extend our hands to peace and negotiations based on international law and the two-state solution, and solving our problems through peaceful means.
And on that note, Saeb Erekat, Hanan Ashrawi, thank you both.
Doctors Hanan Ashrawi, Saeb Erekat, thank you very much indeed for this frank discussion. Thank you, Mehdi, as well. Certainly a poignant discussion on the predicament facing the Palestinians who are, you'll all agree, in a uniquely challenging position. So much to think about, so much to talk about, so I suppose this is a good time now to take a break before we enter into that final round of parallel discussions, which begin, in fact, in just a few minutes at 4:20. But do come back here if you can at 5:15 sharp, as we begin a great round of final sessions, and we start at 5:15 with the Foreign Minister of Iran, Javad Zarif, so you won't want to miss that. We'll see you back here very soon.